Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's webinar on bibliographic and item bulk changes in LEAP. So with the 7.0 update, Innovative has completed the work on bibliographic bulk change functions. So now it's a great time to review the bulk change capabilities of LEAP. So today I'll be reviewing all of the ways to create record sets, the bulk change abilities for item and bibliographic records, and demonstrate some common examples of bulk changes that could be useful to you. To begin with, I'd like to get to know more about you and your experiences that you've had already with bulk changes. So I've created some polls to ask you a couple of questions. So I'm going to launch this poll and give you some time to answer it. The first question is, what is your primary role in your department? Cataloging, acquisitions, both, or public services? Okay, I'm going to end the poll. So 79% of you are cataloging, 7% acquisition, 7% cataloging and acquisitions, and 7% public services. And I have one more poll for you. First question is, how much experience do you have with bulk changes in the client? And the second question is, what record types have you bulk changed? Okay, so 14% have no experience, 29% have some experience, and 57% have a lot of experience. And so it's a 0% have changed the bibliographic records, 71% have both changed the item records, and 29% have changed both bibliographic and item records. Great. So a lot of what I'll be talking about today will already be familiar to you, and it will probably be very easy for you to bulk change a lot of these tasks that I'll be covering already, but it'll be a great review since LEAP does look a bit different than the client. So first, I'm going to cover creating record sets. So I'm going to share my screen and jump right into the demonstration. If at any point you have any questions, feel free to just type them into the chat so that I can answer your questions as you have them. So one thing about LEAP is I've noticed that it really is not as complicated as the client, because the client seems to have like 4 or 5 ways to do everything. But one thing about creating record sets is there really are still a lot of ways to do so. So in the LEAP, I've counted 4 ways to create record sets. So I'm going to review all of those ways because you might find that they are all useful. So the first way is from the main screen using the new drop-down menu at the top. From the new drop-down menu, you can click Record Set. And then the screen will pop up to select which record set to choose from. you can choose bibliographic, item, patron, or authority records. So I'm going to choose item records first because the options for item records are a bit different than bibliographic records, and it's used most commonly. So from the item record set screen, you can choose to scan the barcodes, use the Find tool to search for individual item records. Or one thing that I really like about the record set creation in Leap is that you can add a list of barcodes from a file. The file can be a text file or an Excel file. So if you had a file from Simply Reports, you'd be able to upload that file, although you can still create the record sets in Simply Reports. So you might have passed it on to someone else, and that person could then choose to select that file and upload them. But one thing about working with bibliographic records is that it does not have this option for uploading the file of barcodes, but you could create the item record set first by uploading the barcodes. And then under the top actions drop-down menu, because there's two actions drop-down menu, you can create the bibliographic record set from the item record set, which is a really great feature. You could do it from the bibliographic record set too, and then create the item record set from the bibliographic record set. So I have found that to be useful for myself sometimes. So here's a record set that I had saved up, and now you can see the top actions drop-down menu a bit more has the create item record set darker and not grayed out. The other way to create record sets is from the Find tool. From the Find tool, there are two ways to do so. This shopping bag icon is the icon for record sets. So if you select this icon, regardless of whether you're using the Find tool to search for bibliographic records or item records, if you click on the box to send results to a new record set, type in a name, and you can also set a warning size threshold that would just warn you if there's more records in the search result, and then press apply. And then when you search for something, and then press search, it sends everything in the records results to the record sets, which can be a lot. So if you do know what you would want from a smaller list, you could just select a couple of records from the list, not send the whole results to the record set, and then use the button at the bottom that says add to record set. And then from here, you can choose to add it to a new record set or an existing record set. So if you choose existing record set, it will change the Find tool to the record set's Find tool, and you'd be able to search for it and add your records to the record set by clicking on the record set to select. There is one more way that you can add items to record sets, and this is from within each individual bibliographic or item record. From the Actions drop-down menu at the top of the screen, you can see that you have two options: add it to a new record set or adding it to an existing record set. Are there any questions about creating record sets in LEAP. I'm going to now move on to the next item on my agenda. And I have saved some item record sets over on the side that I had already opened up. And I just wanted to point this out that if you're unfamiliar with LEAP, it's really useful when you have records open to press this, these 3 lines. It will save a list of all the records that you have open or record sets in this sidebar, and you can click on this pin to keep it open. And since I had looked at that bibliographic record called 1967, that has been added to this recent list. So the ones on the current list are what's already open, and recent is what's been closed. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to start with item bulk changes because that is the most commonly utilized bulk change. So you are probably the most familiar with the bulk changes, the circulation status, like to change something to withdrawn, and then to delete the records in bulk. So I'm going to focus more today on the item bulk changes for changing item records from the new to not new status. So today I've created a small item record set of Blu-rays from Algonquin that are on the new shelf. They've been on the new shelf for about a year, so it's now time to move them to the not new shelf. So this is a really easy question for everyone, but let's take a look at this table. Which things do you think will need to be changed in order to move it to the not new shelf? So you can type it at chat, or you can unmute yourself and just answer the question. So Carlin answered material type, shelf location, and call number. That's correct. There's one more thing that needs to be changed, but it's not in this table. Does anyone know what it is off the top of your head? Loan period. Yes. That's possible. There's one more, and that's the fine code. Holdability is also possible. So the Algonquin records do use the fine code. Kid answered at COK, they changed the loan period, fine code, and holdability options. Great, thank you for participating. So there are actually 2 access points for accessing the bulk change screen for item records. And this is a bit different for bibliographic records. So one thing that's different for item records in LEAP is that you're probably used to doing ad hoc bulk changes outside of the record set. But that's not possible yet in LEAP. You can only do the ad hoc bulk changes from within the item record set. So if I were to just select 2 of these items, and I'd be able to access the ad hoc bulk change screen from this second actions drop-down menu right here. But this is not found anywhere outside of the record sets yet. But to be able to change all of the records at one time, you would use this top actions drop-down menu and click on bulk change. So this will look very familiar to you because all of the item tabs are really the same as they are in the client. So in the first tab is location, and this is where you would change your branches, shelf location, and collection. So since everything is in this record set is labeled as new, what needs to be changed on this tab? So you can answer in the chat. Shelf location, right. So I'm going to change this to adult Blu-ray right here. And our next tab is circulation. So this I'm sure you're pretty familiar with, since circulation status is where you would change anything to withdrawn. So like the client, this is where you would change that loan period, material type, fine codes. And it also has the limit to branches and non-circulating or holdable settings. So which do you need to change on this screen for Algonquin's records? You can type it into chat or unmute yourself. Material type, fine code, and holdability. So I'm going to change the material type to regular Blu-rays, fine code to regular Blu-rays, holdable to checked, and next is call number. So one thing that is interesting about Algonquins is that they did use the call number field of the prefix to label it as new instead of having a new sticker. So that does need to be changed. I found that personally that I have used the prefix field to help libraries with some cleanup projects. So you may find that using the call number field could really be useful to you. So if you decide to maybe do a database cleanup project to correct any errors, you could correct errors in the prefix field, or if you would like to genreify your collection. Some libraries have decided to genreify the collection and have found the prefix field to be very useful too. So I'm going to change this to blue. That will remove the new from the prefix. So there's nothing else that needs to be changed for the this specific record set. But I'm going to review the two other tabs because there are some useful things. I know some libraries do use blocks and notes. So from this blocks and notes tab, you could add or remove blocks and notes. Since you possibly add the blocks and notes one at a time, it might be useful to remove them in bulk. So if you wanted to remove them in bulk, you can select none from this drop-down menu. You can also remove the free text blocks and free text notes by clicking on a checkbox for the field and then selecting replace from this drop-down menu. This will replace that field with a blank field and remove that note. But it also allows you to place an additional note before or after an existing note that is already in the record. So if you wanted to keep your notes and just change the information, you can append the note to add it before the existing note, or prepend the note to add it after. Miscellaneous is actually a very important tab to review because that's where they've hidden the display and pack settings. A lot of this you won't find useful, but one thing I've found useful is the bib control number field. I've used that a lot to correct accidental merges. One thing I've noticed that's a bit different in LEAP is that at the moment when you create item records from the bibliographic record, that screen that pops up does not allow you to create multiple item records for multiple copies at a time. So that screen in the client actually has that item barcode section for adding multiple item barcodes, but that's not there in LEAP at this time. I'm not sure if they have plans to add that in the future or not, but if you did use that, you may find it convenient to use this miscellaneous screen to add item barcodes to multiple records at a time. I'm not sure if you'd find that useful or if your preference would be to add the item barcodes manually instead, but this is one option to do with the item record bulk change. So there's one more thing I want to demonstrate before I change these records, and that you can save your settings as a template, just as you would in the client by using the Save as Template button. So I'm going to do that. And this would be really useful if you regularly change these settings from new to not new. So I'm going to label this as Blu-ray new to not new and save the template. So if you were to want to do this again another time, you can just click on the template drop-down menu, select the template, and it would automatically place the settings into the screen. So there's a number of libraries that already have their Blu-ray new to not new templates here. So I'm going to now update the items and press continue. So with the item bulk changes, this happens automatically and the report is downloaded to your computer as a text file automatically. And this tells you the number of records that were processed, if it encountered any errors. Does anyone have any questions about item bulk changes, the report, or would like a demonstration of a specific type of bulk change? If you have any requests for specific bulk changes, I could do that as well. Sandy asks, will you cover bulk changes in BibR? Yes, I am going to cover that right now. So I have switched to my bibliographic record set. At past webinars on Simply Reports, I've spoken on a number of cleanup projects that you can do to identify corrections that can be made with bulk changes. So some of these are in the bibliographic records, like correcting the type of material or the audience level. So I haven't really reviewed those features at the time of the webinar, so this is a great time to review them now that all of the bibliographic bulk change options have been added to LEAP. So I've created this record set as I had previously demonstrated in a Simply Reports webinar, in which I identified the item records that had a mismatch of type of material to item material type. So as you can see in the format, it says video recording instead of DVD. So if I open this up and look at the mark record, I can see that this 007 field is here. But this is a really common mistake for the 007 field. And that is that the position for the video recording format has been set to Laserdisc instead of DVD, which is a bit confusing because a lot of people might not know the difference between a Laserdisc and a DVD, but Laserdiscs are a lot bigger. So for this record set, it really only needs this one change to change that position Laserdisc to DVD. So to access that bibliographic bulk change screen, there is only one option on this top drop-down menu for bulk change. We are not allowed to do ad hoc bulk changes to bibliographic records, so that is not in this lower drop-down menu. So on this top drop-down menu, you can also see that you'd be able to create that item record set from the bibliographic record set, like you could the bibliographic record set from the item record set. So I've opened up the bulk change screen. And the tabs are the same as they are in the client. So the first tab is the non-marked tab. So I'm going to review each of these tabs and we'll demonstrate some additional features to the bulk changes of the records that actually aren't necessary for these records, but we'll just use this record set for a demonstration. So one thing that you may find useful is that on the not mark field, it has the display and pack settings. So you may want to uncheck that at some point so that your records aren't displaying in the pack. This might be useful for, say, if you needed to put books in storage and not have them checked out for a period of time, or if you were in between changing the status to say damaged or lost, as well as one other thing that you might find useful is save provisional records as final. So if you imported a lot of records at one time through Mark import, but it decided to save records as provisional, you would be able to bulk change that here. Save provisional records as final. So on the data field screen, one thing that is a bit different about LEAP is that it shows you initially only the operation drop-down menu, that in the client you can see additional settings first. So once you click on the operation, it does show you the corresponding settings that go with that operation. So under the operation drop-down menu, there's 4 types of operations. Well, it's really 3 because one is a different name, but is similar to the other operations. We've got inserting, deleting, and changing. So for insert, you can insert a new tag or subfield. That subfield can be placed before or after existing subfields. You can also delete existing tags or subfields. It's a bit limiting though, because when you delete a tag, you can choose all instances, the first instance or the last instance. So this could be a bit problematic if some of your records had what you wanted to delete in the first instance and somewhere in the last instance, but you didn't want to delete all instances. So at that time, you may need to review some records manually to make some changes. For deleting subfields, you'd be able to delete all subfields from an existing tag, or you can specify the subfield with specific data. You can also specify the subfield with any data in the last instance. And then your options for changing are to change a tag's number, change a specific subfield code. You can replace a specific subfield with specific data. You can also change the non-filing indicators. So there's two options for that: changing the tags indicators that are specified or correcting the non-filing indicator values, which could be a good cleanup project if you're interested in looking into that. So one thing that would be great, a great project to do would be to bulk add in homosorous subject headings to the records. So this can be done by inserting a new tag. You may also find it useful to both add in 970 fields for those that work in acquisitions, or if you work in cataloging and your acquisition staff is not here today, you could potentially help them out by adding in that 970 field. Now that does normally come from vendors, but not all vendors that you purchase items from have the ability to send you those records. So this could be useful if you haven't received records, say from Amazon. You'd be able to bulk add in a 970 field in order to bulk add your purchase order line items to the purchase order. I'm going to demonstrate both today, but it is using the same operation of inserting a new tag. So I'm going to click on Insert a New Tag in the Operations drop-down menu. And the first thing I'm going to do is to demonstrate adding the subject heading. So since these are all Blu-rays, I'm going to just say I need to add feature films to as a genre heading to the 655 field. So the first thing is to type the tag number, 655. Since these genre headings are going to have a source code in the subfield 2, I need to change the indicator 2 to 7. So this requires clicking on the checkbox and then selecting the 7 from the drop-down menu. So in this first text box here, I'm going to add in the subfield A, and type in feature films. So before you add any subject headings to the change queue, you need to construct the tag. To do so, you first press the return symbol to add a subfield to the list, and then you need to add your second subfield. So this is going to be subfield 2. And I'm going to add this to the list. So I have all of the subfields for a genre heading added to the list. And I'm going to add that to the change queue. So if this were all you needed to do, you can then press Update Bibs. And this will add it to the change queue. It's not made immediately if records are open. It might actually wait a bit before the record's closed. and then we'll go from one record to another. So it's not as immediate as the item record bulk changes. And I will show you where the bulk change report is after I've finished changing some other things with the bulk change screen. So I'm going to go back to data fields and do this one more time. So if I were working in acquisitions and one second. So if I were working in acquisitions and I needed to add that 970 field to records because I did not receive the vendor records, I would need to change this tag number but this does not need an indicator. So I don't need to check any indicator boxes. I just need to construct the subfield. So I've borrowed a 970 field from another library. So I'm just going to add some of their information. So subfield F for the fund code. It's JBT. And then for each of the subcodes, I'm going to have to add that. For each of the subfields, I'm going to have to add it to the first box. So this will be subfield H for my next subfield. And I'm going to add in their code, WGKJPT. So subfield H is the code that is after the word on order and the name of the item template. Subfield L for the location. And they want to add in a price. Well, the price would not be necessarily universal for all of the items. So you might not want to add in the price because it has to be the same for all items in the item record set. But I'll change that to Q and add in the quantity of 1. So since everything needs to be the same in this record set, I'll just add in the fund code for F, subfield H for the item template code, the L for the location, and the quantity of 1. And we'll add this to the change queue and update bivs. So I'm just going to demonstrate one more useful feature, and that could be deleting. So deleting fields or subfields could be useful for a cleanup project, like if you wanted to clean up invalid headings. But as I said, it does have some of those limitations of first tag, last tag, or all instances. So if I were to just choose all instances, since I added 970, I'll use that as an example because that's not necessary to keep in those records. For the tag, you don't have to indicate the information that is in that field, just the number. If it had indicators and you wanted to delete 655s with a specific indicator, you could do that. You could select 655 and then change the indicator to 0. If you wanted to delete any 655s with the second indicator of 0, you could do that. So I'm going to just change this to the 970 again and add that to the queue. So we don't need those 970s. And I'm going to now move on to the next tabs because we do have something to change in the records. So I'm going to review some of these other tabs. The first one is the leader. And this could be useful for changing the encoding level. Since a lot of the records are loaded as less than full level, you would be able to bulk change records to full level. So on these fixed field tabs, there's always two drop-down menus. The first one is the existing code in that position that you can choose from. I like to always choose all values though, because you never really remember which value it could be, or there could be multiple values in the record set. So that allows you to select all of them. And then if you wanted to change it to full level, you can select I full level or blank full level. Either one is fine at this point. One other possible correction project you could do could be to identify types of records that are incorrect. So this is commonly a problem in which, say, language material could be coded as manuscript language material, or audiobooks could be improperly coded as music sound recording instead of non-musical sound recording. So that's another common change. And so one thing about these fixed fields is that there's no button to add it to a change queue. As soon as you just change it and leave it here, it's essentially considered added to the change queue. So the 006 and 007 function the same. So I'm going to go to 007 and not look at 006 since 007 is more common. The first thing you do need to choose is the category of material. So since we are looking at video recordings, I'm going to select video recording. And this has condensed all of the positions underneath these drop-down menus. So you have to expand it by clicking on these arrows. And so when we looked at the record sets, I found that they did have the 07 field, but there was one thing that was different, and that had the video recording format of Laserdisc instead of DVD. So in case there were other codes here, you could choose all values instead of Laserdisc, or you could just choose Laserdisc. You could also choose to leave these as no change, to not change any of the other positions, or if you wanted to just completely change all of them just to make sure it's the correct one, you could do that as well. So you would want to change these from all values to the correct code. So I'm going to change that first one to audio disc. The second one, I'll change to multicolored. Sound on medium will change from all values to sound on medium. And this is useful in case some of the records are missing a code in the position. So medium for sound is video disc. And I'm not going to bother changing dimensions or configuration playback channels right now. I'll just leave those for this demonstration and move on. So next is the 008 tag. This functions similarly as the 06 and 07 tag. You have to choose the type of material, visual materials. And one thing that came up recently is someone was interested in doing a project for changing the audience. So they were correcting the audience from one that was not allowed by our bibliographic input standards to the juvenile. So This functions the same as those other drop-down menus. The first drop-down menu is the existing value, so I like to use all values. And the second would be for juvenile, if I were changing it to juvenile. So if you were working on books, you might find this useful. For other fields, you may want to correct the literary form or the biography code. There's a number of errors that could exist in record that you could find and correct. And so I'm going to now press Update Bibs. And this will add all of these changes that I've added, the deletion of the 970, the correction of the leader, and the correction of the 007 to the change queue. And if I press continue, it will add it to the queue. But if I press cancel, I can go back and delete some of these tasks from the queue. So I'm going to press continue. And now it's going to add the report to the cataloging processing menu. If you click on utilities, you will find cataloging processing under the menu. This is where you can find both the bibliographic book change reports and the MARC import report on this second tab. So like the import reports and the bibliographic reports in the client, it will say pending if it hasn't completed. You can press refresh until you see that it has completed. And then you can just click on the row to open the report. So this will take a long time to open it. So I want to actually stop sharing the screen and open one that is on my desktop because that has an error that I can show you. So when you look at the bibliographic book change reports, you will see potential errors and statistics. So in most cases, everything will be fine and it will not encounter any errors. But it does do some MARC validation when it bulk changes the bibliographic records. And some of the things that it looks for are like if the heading already exists, if you're adding a heading, and it will not change it or add a duplicate. So it will let you know in the exceptions that a duplicate was found. On rare cases, though, there are other exceptions that you can find. And I think these are probably rare because it would have to happen when, if you were to initiate a bulk change, add it to the queue, and then someone else were to open up the record, make a change to it, and save it after you've already added it to the queue. And then you would see this condition appear that says the record has been modified since the bulk change job was posted. So I think this would only happen in cases if you were bulk changing something that was really popular at the time and multiple libraries were receiving that record all at the same time. So I think this could potentially be avoided if you work on bulk changes during non-peak hours, like earlier in the morning, around lunchtime, or at the end of the day. But if you do encounter this exception, feel free to email me at the help desk and I can help you out because there is a SQL query that I have that can look through the whole record set to create another record set from these items so that you can then correct them after someone else has worked on them. Are there any questions about bulk changes for bibliographic records? Sandy asks, can you only add one tag per operation? If I wanted to bulk add a fictitious character and a genre to the same bib records, would I have to run the fictitious character operation, then come back to add the genre heading, or can I add them both in one operation? You can add them both in one operation. I just demonstrated them in different operations today to have potentially different reports show up on this screen and to have them separate to see if it would open up. But it's a bit slow today, so it wouldn't let me open it very quickly. Are there any other questions? Oh, here it is. It opened up, and here's some other examples of exceptions that you can see. It has one for the record is locked. So that means someone had opened it already, or I had opened it and that was locked. And here you can see that it didn't add a tag because it already exists. So if the tag already exists, it will say duplicate tag and it will not add it. But here, the feature film did not exist in the records, so it added feature films to the records. So in the statistics, it was able to add it to 3 out of 4 records. Or process 3 out of 4 records. It only added it to the 2 records. Are there any other questions? Adrian says, beware that if you are running bulk changes on multiple record sets simultaneously, it will not work on records that are in more than one record set. So you will get that exception that I showed you, that the record had been changed after the bulk change had been added to the queue. Sandy would like to have me demonstrate adding 2 tags at once. Sure. Okay. We'll open up a different record set, but that's an Atlas record set. So the first thing you would do to add a tag is select Insert a new tag. So I'm going to add in a 655 tag. The second indicator is 7. And this will be children's atlases. And then I'll add in the source code, LCGFT, and press add, and then add it to the change queue. So to add another tag, you would select the operation again, insert a new tag, and this time I'll just add atlases. I'm adding the subfield A, atlases, pressing the return symbol, changing the subfield to 2, adding in the LCGFT source code, and then add it to the change queue. So in this change queue, it then has added children's atlases and then atlases. So you can add as many things to the change queue as you'd want. Thank you everyone for coming today. If you do want to take a look at some of these bulk change reports, feel free to log in. You will be able to see my bulk change reports once these have processed eventually today, and look at the record sets. Feel free to take some time and play around with the bulk changes yourself. I will email everyone again all of the links to the training materials. The record sets in LEAP course has been updated with bibliographic bulk change exercises for both acquisitions and cataloging. So it includes the ones for subject headings for cataloging, and it includes one for adding a 970 field for acquisitions. And there's also the documentation. I'll send out the links again to the documentation on our website. We do have a survey that we'd really like everyone to fill out. I'm going to post a link to that in the chat and email it to you as well. We would love to hear your feedback on all of our training courses and our webinars so that we can improve them and make them better throughout the year. Thank you, everyone.